Riley. Hello. Yes. This is my first talk, so anything that you have to say that's mean, shh. No, any feedback's great. My name is May. I am currently working at a Fortune 500 company, or consulting at one. I work for a wonderful consulting company called Reusable. We are hiring. And right now at that company, at that large Fortune 500 company, I am trying to help them to build a reusable component library. So that is thrilling. That is what I know. If you are here from Rhythm, please raise your hands. Woo! Okay, yeah, that's like the whole crowd. Woo! Yeah! So, if anyone is looking for jobs or hiring, come talk to any of us. Great. So, the first question you probably have is, how did I end up building a reusable component library? Basically, someone was like, you have to build one. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. That sounds hard and big, and I don't know if it's the right choice. And everyone else said, yes, May, you have to do it. So now, of course, we're doing it. And I started to actually enjoy it, which I was a little skeptical about, but I'm excited about it. So the first thing, though, was that I was thinking was like, why should we actually do this? I don't want to just make a decision just because Google has one, just because Palantir has one, just because all these other big companies have them. Why do we need to have one? Is our team actually at the right place to make this decision? So the first thing, of course, I was thinking about, being the negative, pessimistic person that I am, is why should I not build a component library? So the first point that I was thinking of is, if your team has a really low tolerance for risk, any big project is going to be a little bit scary, right? And an entire library that multiple teams are going to use and could potentially be open source, that's a lot of upfront effort for a potentially very low payoff. What happens if no one wants to use your library and you've invested years into building it, right? So you really have to consider, like, what's the appetite for risk? Have you built an MVP yet? If you have, maybe you have some revenue generating code. Maybe you can have a little more leeway on building something like this. If you haven't, maybe you need to just kind of ship something, right? Okay, what about if your team is new to reusability? What if no one on your team has ever built an NPM module? Or maybe they have never worked on an open source project. In that case, they might not really have a deep understanding of how to build a reusable component, and they maybe don't know how to set up a repo with documentation and all these different important things that will encourage people to actually use your library. So maybe start with like a lunch and learn, where you all build a reusable component together, right? Okay, this is everyone's favorite. Everyone's like, yeah, my team can do that. Totally, we are just rock stars, and there are 3 of us, we can do everything, right? If there are 3 of you, what happens if someone quits and they're maintaining the repo, right? You have to be honest with yourself about whether or not your team actually has the bandwidth to both build and actually maintain one. Who's going to answer all the issues? Who's going to review the pull requests, right? Okay, and this is my favorite one, because everyone knows that even for engineers, we're like, you can build anything. The world's not oyster, right? It's not, okay? Because product and business people care about money, which is important, of course. So a library doesn't directly impact the bottom line. It's not revenue generating code. It is eventually once you're using it in production, but while you're building it, it just kind of lives in a repo. Occasionally you're pulling things in, but you have to make sure that you can justify the upfront time spent so that they'll make time for you to execute. Okay, so if you're not like super bummed out on this idea now, which I'm honestly hoping some of you are, because I don't think that some teams are ready to build something like this. There are a lot of benefits to building a reusable component library. First of all, like this is what everyone always thinks about, right? You start to go faster. If you're building a button and your teammate's building a button and one of you is building one with a button tag, one of you is using a link and styling it, you're both thinking through the exact same idea, doing it a little bit differently, and taking double the time to do it, right? You need to reuse your code. So that's kind of an obvious one. How about when a user comes to your site and it looks like 8 different people built it, and you can tell that like this part was definitely built by that guy, and this part was built by that lady, and whatever. You want a consistent experience. Your designers are working really hard to deliver consistency to your users, so we need to do them a favor and help them out with that. Plus, if there's like a design language system, we want to be using it. We want to have a consistent experience. This one, I'm a little skeptical about, but I was thinking about it, so I put it in here. If you're using the same code and you're importing it every time, you're going to be writing less JavaScript to do these simple things, right? You're not recreating a button everywhere. You're not recreating a toggle everywhere. So you're actually going to reduce the size of your JavaScript bundle, and you could potentially see performance improvements there. This is my favorite. Okay, this is the best one. As developers, we're always trying to reduce the surface area where bugs can hide, right? Because they're everywhere, they're hard to find. The bigger your code base, the less likely you are to find them. Additionally, we want things to be simple, we want them to be readable. That's going to help us be faster, it's going to help us be more performant, and it's going to help us reduce the amount of time we have to spend maintaining code. Because finally, when a new JavaScript framework comes out next week, you can replace your app component by component rather than throwing the whole thing away, which I think is a huge benefit. And actually, right now, with the code base that I'm working on, we are literally rebuilding a code base from scratch in React now. So I know that it's kind of hard to look this far down the road and think, oh, we won't have to do that, it'll be fine, but you will definitely have to do that, and it's not going to be fine. Cool. So one thing that a lot of developers maybe don't know is exactly how to build a reusable component. We think we know because we built components that are reusable, within our application, but reusability isn't really a binary concept, it's a spectrum, okay? So there are a couple of different ways for a component to be reusable. The first one is that you can't reuse it at all. It's super tied to the context of the application that it's in. Maybe it's making API requests, maybe it's like really tied to the data layer. You can't reuse it anywhere, not even within your own app. Of course, we're always trying to avoid that kind of thing. We don't want that to happen, but sometimes deadlines come up, we have to ship code, whatever. Then, what most of us probably think of as reusable is something that can be reused within our application. It's maybe used 3 or 4 different places, we feel good about it, might have like a test. And then finally, there's this like final level of reusability, which is that you can share this component across teams, across applications. You can't, that's difficult. You have to put a lot of effort into doing something like that, right? You have to put it in a repo somewhere that it's shared. You have to write documentation so people you don't know can use it. There are a lot of different things that you have to consider when you are building your reusable component. So first of all, what are the use cases? How are other developers that you don't know, you've never met, how are they going to try and use your component? And as we know with users, they're going to try some really interesting, creative ways of interacting with your component. And what happens when they use it in an unexpected way, in a way that it's actually not designed to be used? Does it just fail silently? Does it throw an error, a helpful error? Does it just say, uh-oh, what happens? Also, how do you actually expose your component's like mini API to its children? How do you take a component and let other components actually access the logic that's in there? How do you encapsulate states and share it with other components? What patterns are available to you in the language or library or framework of your choice? So in React, there are a couple of patterns that we kind of have agreed upon are useful for this. I'm not going to get too into depth on this, but I kind of want to give you something to Google if you haven't heard of it, or if you have, just to remind you as a concept. So for example, if you're doing something like logging data to a dashboard or something, you might have a higher order component. In this case, I have something called with performance logging. You take another component in it and then share this performance logic with it. So it's used like this. So say you had, for example, a hero component. You wanted to see how long it took for the image in the hero component to load. You might wrap hero with performance logging, and then you can just use a component called hero with performance logging. So that's a way to share logic, to share state with your other components. Then there's my actually preferred, wow, I don't know why Pinterest is showing up on here. That's interesting. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sponsored. So, so my preferred way of actually exposing like the API of my component is a render prop, which, if you've heard of Capozzi, which you probably have, he's really into this, so that's how I know about just not impressive. But anyways, so for example, he likes to use a toggle. This is actually a toggle that I built for our reusable component library. It's just another way to share this like toggle content logic and this state. So whether the toggle is toggled on or off with any children inside of it. So this would be the use case, right? You could have one child, you could have 20 children, and all of those children can interact with this toggle component and be toggled on or off depending on whatever you pass into the toggle. So all of that is really interesting. We're engineers, we love that kind of stuff. We like reading and learning. But unfortunately, that's actually not the hard part of just building a reusable component library. The actual hard part is creating a culture that actually facilitates discussion and growth. That's the really big challenge here. For example, do the developers that you work with know how to write documentation? And even more importantly, do they actually want to write documentation? So many times I've come across a library, this looks perfect for my use case. Look at these great examples that I see like across the internet. And then I go to use it and it's like, this is a library. That's it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, how about decision making on your team? Who traditionally makes decisions on your team? Do you have a CTO? Do they just make all the decisions and everyone just does it? Does product make decisions? And now you're working on a project without product and you don't know who's going to make these decisions. Is it from the ground up? Is it a democracy? Do people have veto power? These are all going to come up, and it's going to be dramatic and great because you get to find out, what kind of communication flaws does your team have? But it's hard, right? Okay, how about styling? Should the components actually have styles? Are they just small little base components like atoms, and you don't really want them to have styles, and then anybody using them can apply their own style sheets? Alternatively, like, how should you implement them? Should it be CSS and JS? Should it be emotions? Should it be Sass? Should it be CSS? Should it be CSS modules? So many options, and everyone is going to have an opinion, and no one's going to agree. How about you have a design language system that only some people in the company use, and other people don't? Do you make those the default styles? Are you like secretly making some sort of like political statement by doing that? All questions that you have to think about, and you probably are not really interested in staying up all night thinking about them, but you will. That's great because you get to decide these things. This is my favorite one. What linter should you use? Should you use a linter? Should you use the one that your company uses? Should you use the Airbnb style guide? Should you use Career? All these questions, you're going to talk about them for like weeks. But it's great because you get to learn how to communicate with your team. You get to learn about all these other questions that you have, like decision making. Who's going to make these decisions? Okay, finally, when it comes to the PR process, you have to think about who's going to be a maintainer, who gets to merge, who's a gatekeeper, who's making PRs, who can respond to issues, and what happens if the build fails and someone merges something, for example. What do you do? So all this is really just to say that either way, the technical trade-offs, it's like, yes, it's very beneficial. Do it, that sounds great, everyone should do it. It's great. Or don't do it at all, and that's also fine. But you should just be sure about your decision. You should really think through these trade-offs and make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Make sure that you work through trade-offs. Make sure that you learn about the techniques to actually build usable components. Don't just take components that you have in your app and just put them in there. Then you can only reuse them again in the app that you took them out of, right? Don't do that. And then also just prepare for the challenges that you're going to face. Prepare for the organizational and cultural challenges that maybe you're not thinking about yet. Because those are really going to make or break the project. Well, thank you very much. I just want to say that these slides, I built them in React with Spectacle from Reusable Labs, which is pretty fun. And thank you to Joe for the design that he helped me with. And also someone named Elizabeth Crouch who ran to the talk with me. So thank you very much. Do we ask questions or not?
Yeah, sure.
Oh no, what if I? Never mind. Yeah.
You said how you can rebuild and redo components and whatnot, but you said it's not a big deal. But like, my question is, you said you're actually doing that right now. Are you still doing that within a React framework, or is it a whole different framework? Because that's where I kind of,
Oh, so you're saying like in the app that I'm working in, I went from another language to
well, that's
something
what I'm
else?
asking, because like
Okay.
that's why for me it's like you wouldn't, if you build a component, it looks good, you might tweak it, right? But then you're still committed to a certain framework.
Sure.
These are all components within React, and you got to put that kind of out there too.
Sure. Well, so to be more specific about what I was doing, actually outside of this project, I'm working on like an app that's in production, and that's the app that's being moved from an older technology to being written in React. But I have heard of a lot of cases where, for example, a lot of people are moving from Angular to React, and they have this like quasi-Angular, quasi-React app where they're actually building their components in React, but a lot of the structures in Angular still. What I'm really suggesting is that, say we had a different library and wanted to build another type of component library, you could probably replace like your button component in React with a button from another library that was in a different language. You would have to set it up, and I've seen it done like with Angular and React, but that's about as far as I've gotten into it.
I have a very similar question. So I'm working on an app where we are very slowly and painfully converting from Backbone to React. Yeah, it's great. And so I wrote down, like, how do you deal when you are making these conversions? Have you had any either great successes or horrible failures dealing with the scene, like where those two worlds meet? Have you had any either really great techniques or awful, you should never do that techniques for trying to make the two things work as you're making the transition?
Sure. I wish that I could tell you more about this, but really what's happening is they threw out the old site and we're just building a completely new React site. So I have not actually like done it piece by piece like that. I'm just out of my research, that's what I found.
It's the best kind of scene is lax.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose unless you really don't want to throw your old app out and do a giant project and try and build, because what ends up happening is like, you want to build an MVP, right? But if you have an app that's been live for 5 years, you're going to have to build all of those features again. So ideally, you would be able to do it incrementally, I think. Although it's probably painful, I imagine.
It's fun.
Yeah.
So you did a really good job explaining all the challenges across the board. What was your biggest hurdle when you started to sort of create everything in a reusable component format?
So the team that I'm working on, we have like a larger structure, and there are like 4 teams underneath it. And we were kind of just told, you have to do this, right? And the points that I raised were, well, what about the like structural challenges? What about the organizational challenges? And we were just told, no, you have to do it. So most of the developers were like, I have a sprint board. I have things I need to do. Why would I spend some of my sprint time working on this kind of like ill-defined project? So the hardest thing that I had to do was go to the person who asked for it and be like, I want to take this on as someone who is going to like structure it, and then having to talk to all the other developers who I didn't really know and say, okay, what would incentivize you to do this? Why would you want to do this? Is there anything that is compelling to you? What are your concerns? And then like addressing each of those concerns so that now people are like, yeah, we're doing it. But that was probably the hardest thing that I had to do.
That's great.
Cool. Oh,
I talked about learning the right techniques for building a reusable library. How would you go about researching those right techniques?
sure. So I wanted to try and give like a couple keywords so that if anyone wanted to look up higher order components or render props, you can spend a little more time. I know that Capozzi just came out with a new like updated course called like Advanced React Patterns on Egghead. I think that's a good place to look for things. Also, just generally looking at libraries that already exist. Material UI is a good example. Palantir has a good example that I can't remember the name of right now.
Kind of touching on that, I mean, React and its whole ecosystem. Well, first, it's like React and React Native, so I'm kind of curious how applicable components are in your professional experience, and also just given how React kind of like has a baseline and then you kind of do your own thing. And like, are there like, do you need to create a component library? Are there good component libraries out there? Do you build off an existing component library? You kind of do your own thing. Is it more for functionality, for style, both? Like, it's more about the ecosystem. What your
It's a whole
thoughts are.
talk. Well, for the first question, I haven't really used React Native, so I can't totally speak to that. For the second question, which is basically like, can you use other libraries? Do you have to build from scratch, and what's the benefit? What's the value?
You have preferences.
Sure. I think you totally shouldn't build everything from scratch. We happen to be, but I don't necessarily think that's the right choice. I think there are if we don't want to rebuild a button a million times, we don't want to rebuild a form a million times. Why are we rebuilding a form ever? Kind of. I mean, it depends on how you think about dependencies, how many you want to maintain. Of course, there are so many trade-offs, but if you're a small team and you don't want to invest a ton of time and energy and money into something like this, I think that starting from somewhere else is a great idea. It really depends. I think less on the technical decisions always matter, but I do think they actually matter less than the team dynamics and the size of your team and the stage that you're in. And so I think evaluating technical decisions against those other points that you might have to deal with is really the important part there. Cool. Great. Thank you very much.